I was on the inside long enough, knowing that if you're on the outside looking in, you have no idea what's going on. I know a little bit about comics. If I'm working with a licensed property, I don't feel the need to rethink or retool them. None of us are going to be Shakespeare. So just kind of have fun with it. I don't say that to pander. I really do believe that it is everybody who works on it. I am a fan and I am a reader, and readership is really big because what people buy, what people respond to, what people like shapes the universe too.
All right, well, we are back on the channel with Brandon Montclare, writer of Moongirl, Devil Dinosaur, Rocket Girl, and now DuckTales. Brandon, nice to meet you, man. Thanks for hopping on the channel.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm going to have some fun, I think.
Yeah, it's cool to talk to you about this, especially, with what you got going on recently. As somebody who grew up watching, the animated series of DuckTales religiously and really enjoyed it. I'm curious, like, how did you get involved with this project? And tell me a little bit of the backstory for DuckTales here.
So kind of the way that most writers get hired, the editor called me up, Nate Cosby. He's called me up and said, hey, we're interested in doing a Disney book with us. And, they've been doing some, a couple of monthly books so far with different Disney properties. It's been a while since I was working on a monthly. Moongirl ended a couple of years ago now. And I've been working kind of in book market stuff and some movie and TV and video game stuff. So that's all kind of like development. So you never really see it on the shelves. And as far as like original graphic novels that I'm working on for the book market, that's like a much longer development and then writing, and then you do it all and they market it for a year. So it's like a huge process compared to the speed of comics. So I was definitely interested in doing a monthly comic again, kind of keep me honest, right? To keep me working on something every day. And so he said, I called up and I said, oh, Disney, this is in my head. I like the classic stuff, if it's, Fantasia or Cinderella or something like that. I have two daughters, so some of the new stuff I've watched. He said, some of the new stuff could be cool. In between there, I'm not so sure, but he said DuckTales, and it was like 100%. I did watch the cartoon when I was younger, but more than that, there's like a very big history in comics with Uncle Scrooge. So it's kind of an honor to work on that character. So it was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, my audience will be like very familiar with the Golden Age comic books and the Carl Barks work and all the stuff dating back to the Four Color series and Merry Melodies and all that. And did you have any like familiarity with Carl Barks's work and that sort of thing? I mean, I know that this is more based off of I think the animated series, but were you familiar with kind of those old school comic books?
Yeah, obviously it's been reprinted all the time, so it's always been available, but. I didn't really start reading the Barks stuff until, until I was working as a professional. I've been doing that for a while now, though. But, it's hard, I think, to be a writer or a creator, and you're in it for long enough. You're going to come across Barks and someone goes, oh, I've never read the Carl Barks Duck stuff. And I said, I don't know. And so I don't know when I read it. It was probably even after the Don Rosa stuff came out. So, probably 20 years ago that I started reading it. And you get really into it, and then you get into something else and you come back to it. So I was very familiar with it. But DuckTales I watched when I was a little kid. So I was always a bit contrary when I was a little kid. I was into comics since I was very young. So I knew Turtles from the original black and white series. Couldn't get the issues. They were too hard to get, especially for a little kid that I was. But by the time it was the Pizza Cowabunga Turtles, I wasn't so into it. I was, that's not cool. So when DuckTales was coming out, I would have been more into Robotech and He-Man and G.I. Joe and Humanoids and Crystar action figures and all that other kind of stuff. But I've said this a couple of times, and it's true. I look back at some of that stuff. I don't know if it holds up. DuckTales holds up. It was a really well-made show. So
yeah, that's funny that you caught that, and I'm sure like watching back, you can actually see that. Where, at least in my memory, I really enjoyed it, even at a later age, because I did feel like, while it was obviously designed for kids, it was cohesive. Like the storytelling was there. Like it made, its sense. It's like, okay, we're globetrotting and we're solving, the treasure hunt of the week sort of episodic, thing that really worked. And the humor was there. And the logic and the world building was actually quite well done. I mean, I was just going back, in getting ready to talk to you, just going back and looking at all like the DuckTales stuff. And I'm like, man, like I know all these characters, like Launchpad, I know Gizmo Duck, like Darkwing Duck, and other Dynamite titles. So it's funny how rich the world actually was. It's like, it feels like the people who made that show like cared about it, even if it was just for kids.
Yeah, it was a tremendously well done show, and it wasn't just thrown together. I don't know much about the world of animation, but you look back at that show, and it is a lot was put into it. The music, obviously the animation, but the stories and the continuity and the world building, and it's all really out there. And sometimes, as a comic creator, you can kind of get lost in the Uncle Scrooge stuff. You say, "Oh, Uncle Scrooge." He's Carl Barks is a Hall of Famer. Don Rosa came back and won all these Eisner Awards and Harvey Awards and everything else, and it's been, like I said, a prestige title for comic creators. But DuckTales is what people like, if I'm waiting online to pick up my 8-year-old after school, like all the parents go, "Oh, DuckTales, I remember that show." And they all sing the song, you know what I mean? And they do it. So DuckTales was, I think, made a huge impact on people my age. So it's an exciting thing to work on because you get a little bit of everything. Like I don't have to be so highfalutin, right? That I'm like the next Carl Barks, or no, it's an all ages title. It's really well put together. It's tons and tons of characters that, if I have 100 issues, I won't probably get to do everything I ever wanted to do with them. That's in my head over the last couple of months working on it. But yeah, it's just super excited. And I think it's going to be, it's weird because I said, obviously you have a lot of collectors and kind of Wednesday warriors. And that was me. I collect comics my whole life. So I understand that. But working on Moongirl was like, it was kind of that way where it's not really the monthly comics that finds it, that where the readers are going to find it. It's like in the collected editions, which will be like, for DuckTales, it's going to be probably, I guess it'll be sometime next year, right? But it's going to, I think, serve all masters. I think it's going to be really cool stuff. And hopefully people who pick it up and read it as individuals who are like those comic book hardcore fans are going to actually really enjoy it. And then it'll be like a whole nother audience coming into it when it's something that you can pick up easily off of a Barnes & Noble bookshelf or on Amazon or wherever the case may be.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about just that right there, like the audience and stuff. Like one of the things I thought about with as far as like comic collecting and following the old school Carl Barks stuff, which, now these days, there's his very first DuckTales work is this comic called 4-Color Number 9.
Yeah.
Recently, had its record sale just a year ago, selling for like $30,000. And there's definitely like this collector base for it. There's people who really like this stuff. But at the same time, the funny books, the Disney stuff, like the Looney Tunes, the 4-Color being that title, there's Crazy Cat, like all these characters that came out in that era, they're not like, they don't quite have the same value as say when you collect like the Captain America books, because the nostalgia isn't there. And so where I'm going with all that is I think it's really interesting how this show that started when we were kids, when I watched it, I would have thought that, hey, this was like a brand new property, but it's actually, taking it for this next generation. You're kind of doing that now here with this comic book, taking it sort of to a next generation, but also probably to an ingrained audience. I'm curious what you think about playing to both of those audiences in a way, and how you handle that to onboard sort of that next generation so that they too one day can have nostalgia and then discover those 4-Color things and find themselves on, Heritage Auction paying tens of thousands of dollars for old comics.
Yeah. It's kind of simple conceptually. The idea is, all ages is obviously a category, but to me, it's all audiences, and you can say, okay, well, you just make it for everyone, and you got to truly do that. And that's a lot harder to do than it is to say, right? But I mean, it exists. Certainly, I have an 8-year-old who's going to have fun and always laughs watching The Simpsons, but there's a lot in The Simpsons that obviously she won't get for 10 or more years. But going back to stuff that's before our time, like, the old Bugs Bunny stuff, that's hilarious. You watch that stuff now, it's hilarious. I can watch Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, falling off a cliff every time. And it's so visually interesting, and the writing in that sense, even though it's, almost no dialogue or no dialogue. Right. And it's just great stuff. So, there's material out there that exists. You have to make it appealing to everyone. It's really just balance. And it's hard to describe other than that. It's, taking bits and pieces and really doing kind of what I like to do, I think, which is, not to be egocentric about it, but I find a lot of kids' books are written for parents who are going to buy it for their kids. Like I said, I had experience doing it on Moongirl, where I always approached every issue of that, where it's like, grown-ups are the bad guys, the teachers are the bad guys. Not terrible human beings, because that would be almost too cliche. But they're all kind of sellouts, or they're tired and they don't have the energy, and it's everything else. And so you have to kind of make it a bit subversive. That being said, you're not going to have anything like kind of wild that's going to make the front page of the newspaper. Oh my God, look what they did to Uncle Scrooge McDuck. But there has to be that little bit of a dig in it to make it funny, a little bit of self-awareness. Even if to me, comedy is in everything that I've always liked to read. People can talk about Frank Miller bringing in the grim and gritty with Dark Knight Returns. But if you read Dark Knight Returns, I don't know the last time you read it, how much of a fan you are, but I'm laughing my ass off when I read Dark Knight Returns. It's funny, and stuff like that. I think that just injection of humor goes a long way. And obviously you're allowed to do humor in DuckTales. So it's, we'll find out when the book's out in November, but there was a way to do it. I hope I did it right.
I'm curious what it was like working for the mouse, or at least in some way tangentially working for the mouse. Obviously it's through Dynamite, but it's sort of a Disney property. I, in my outside YouTube life, have done a lot of work for Disney. So I've definitely had those experiences where, we're setting up to, make a commercial for their new TV series. And we have a conference call, and there's 60 executives who I have no idea why there are 60 people here, but they're all on the call. And it's very important that we, come to a consensus on the shoes being blue, because blue is very important, or it could be green. We should really decide this and hammer it out. But I'm curious if that has been your experience at all in sort of having like a legacy character. What it's sort of like working with Disney in this.
Well, I don't want to jinx myself. It's been smooth sailing for me, but again, in this particular case, it might be all to the credit of Nate Cosby, the editor, and the team at Dynamite, because there's a layer in between me and the Disney people who are approving it. So they have feedback. There's things you can and can't do. They don't, said, even though Donald Duck was in the new, and this is based, just to be clear, it is based on the 1987 continuity. So you can't use anything from the newer cartoon. From the old comics, Donald Duck would show up with all time says, no, don't put Donald in it because that's separate, so they silo the different properties that they have. So there's some of that stuff, which is just like, okay, getting used to it. But no, they've been very happy with what I've been doing on it, insofar as not having notes. Again, knock wood. I don't want to jinx it, but some of that is I'm not looking to. DuckTales is a great property. I don't feel the need to kind of put my own stamp and version of it that's going to be radical in the sense, at the root of it, to change it any. It's a great title with great characters, with a great setup. It's everything you need. I've done the creator-owned thing. Moongirl was a new character for Marvel. I did Rocket Girl. I have other stuff that's coming out. If I'm working with a licensed property, and when you think about it, Marvel and DC, they're licensed property, all those superheroes too. It's I don't feel the need to rethink or retool them. I worked at DC Comics for a while on the Batman title, but if someone would say, "Hey, Brandon, pitch us a Batman story," it's like, well, it's a guy who's traumatized when he's a little kid. He's a billionaire, and now he dresses up like a bat to go and terrorize street thugs and throw them out windows. You know what I mean? It's what's the Hulk? Well, the Hulk. Okay, what's my pitch on the Hulk? Well, the Hulk is a scientist who gets caught in a radiation bomb, and when he's angry, he kind of blacks out and turns into a monster. And he wakes up and he hopes, "Oh, I hope I didn't do anything too bad." It's not anything that I feel needs a fresh take, if that makes any sense.
No, it does make sense, and it's funny that you bring that up, because that was something I wanted to get into with you. Is I feel like within writing, especially, but in the creative space, that's sort of been like a big conversation, not just in comic books, but even in films and TVs and everything. I don't know if you saw Glen from the Comic Palace, if this happened to like go across your sphere of social media, but there's a comic shop owner who sort of had we'll call it an epic rant about.
I am familiar.
Yeah, modern writers inserting themselves or subverting the character, or changing stuff. I'm curious, like, where do you, I mean, you kind of answered it, but where do you feel is the line with that when you sort of take on a legacy character? Where should you put your spin on it? And do you think that Glen's rant is even like something that is going on right now in comic books, or is that sort of like just individual titles kind of have that within each other?
Yeah, well, certainly all due respect for Glen. Not that I've ever met him, but I've watched his show a couple times, and I'm familiar with when it all happened, and it's safe to say I'm on Team Glen. But I also think it's I have to say it's how I approach it is just how I approach it. There's plenty of people who've done radical renewals of characters and totally have changed them that have been fantastic and that I love. There are people who put every bit of themselves or every bit of the issue of the day into a comic book or a movie or whatever, and it's fantastic stuff. So I don't have anything. There's no knee-jerk reflex reaction like, oh no, they're changing anything. I mean, I changed a lot to Devil Dinosaur, but in my mind, Devil Dinosaur was 9 issues by Jack Kirby, and then he didn't really go anywhere with it. And so do you keep him in dinosaur world eating cavemen all day long? I said that could be cool too. I mean, but to me, it's like, well, okay, the idea was to do something in the modern DCU, to use a pre-existing character that they hadn't kind of done anything with a while. So, Moongirl's a brand new character. Devil Dinosaur kind of wasn't what the old Devil Dinosaur comic was, but I didn't feel that I was really, stomping on anything. But anyway, I'm going in a million directions because I think there's more than one way to skin a cat. You can do it all different kinds of ways. And certainly, I think at the end of the day, it's simply if people like it or not, and you're always going to, the more famous you are, the more copies that you sell. There's always going to be that percentage of people who don't like it. So the bigger your book, the bigger your name, the more, if you listen to it, there's more voices out there talking crap about you. But, I happen to, who knows, except I've never met Glen but people like that. When I approach these things, it's like I said before, to me, these characters are so great. I want to work with them kind of within the parameters that have been established within that familiarity. But if everyone worked like me, you would never get anything new. You would never have great changes. You would never have these kind of new takes that are important. So again, it's just how I approach it, because I think Uncle Scrooge and Huey, Dewey, and Louie are so great, and Launchpad, and and Gyro Gearloose, and Doofus, and Webby, and everyone else, and Magic of Dispel. They're all cool characters. I don't sit there waiting, wow, I wish I could fix them. They're so good already. And like I said, I've had plenty of opportunities. I'm very lucky to do my own thing. So,
Yeah, it's interesting when you have a character that people have such an idea of who they are in their head, and the culture has sort of formed around, these are the core tenets of this person. This is not just from like a look, but like just what they stand for and their personality. And it is a difficult task to sort of give people something fresh that feels, I can read this, but it's also familiar at the same time. And maybe there's just an issue here where, you brought it up, with all due respect to the, massive Devil Dinosaur fans, from Jack Kirby's original run, the all the people that love that. I think it's fair to say that, like you said, the Devil Dinosaur didn't necessarily have like a fan base that is like, this is exactly how the character needs to be. So it gave you like an opportunity to fill in some of the blanks that might have been there. But maybe if you're taking on a character like Bruce McDuck, we kind of know, that he likes money, probably should be, part of his character and part of his core beliefs. I think that stuff is where people really get upset when those things sort of get changed. And I don't know how much of an epidemic it really is versus like, it obviously you sort of see it every now and again when like companies try to do radical changes to characters. But for the most part, I think a lot of the titles are, Hulk still Hulk, Ghost Rider still Ghost Rider for the most part.
Yeah. Ghost Rider is a good example, right? Because what's cooler than Ghost Rider? And I know there's been, at least 2 versions. There's probably been 10 versions since Johnny Blaze, right?
Yeah.
But there was a Ghost Rider who rode a horse and was a cowboy, and that's kind of cool in a retro way. But
Sure.
when I was 13 years old, digging through quarter bins for old issues of Ghost Rider, I wasn't looking for the guy on the horse. I was looking for the guy on the motorcycle. You know what I mean? So sometimes you need a radical change, and makes it that much better. Again, it's just I tend to be kind of middle of the road as I get older, and I've met a lot of people who make comics. I met a lot of people in publishing, and nobody tries to make a bad comic. Nobody's trying to saying, oh, I'm going to take this and I'm going to ruin it for people who love it. Even when people make a radical change on something, it's been my experience 100% of the time, although I'm sure there's exceptions, but my personal experience 100% of the time, they love the original and they're trying to honor the original by adding something new and adding a new twist on it.
Yeah. I find it interesting because I think you're right. I think for the most part, most creative people are just trying to do great work. Mm-hmm. And they would love more than anything for people to just sort of, read their work or watch their movie or play their video game or whatever. And everyone's just really happy with the product. But I do say that there are some times that maybe this is not so much in the comic space, but maybe more in the film space. It does feel like there's a lot of executives that are fearful of doing the bit. Maybe a lot of people do feel the need to put their stamp on things, or they believe that, hey, this will just be boring if we do the same sort of story. But I think audiences like what they like. I think that they're open to, hey, give me some DuckTales globetrotting. Or just give me some adventures,
right.
And take those kind of pulp Indiana Jones style stories that DuckTales are known for, and give me some of that, and I'll eat it up,
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know what it is. If there's maybe when creatives are in it, they get it too much in their head, or I'll lump in editors here or executives, that want to kind of change up formulas on things. Like I get it, like you want to do stuff that's fresh, but maybe they overthink sometimes.
Sure, but that's life. It's a tough business. It's a tough thing to any creative, endeavor is. You really put yourself out there, and with the internet today, you can really get it's a lot of feedback all at once, and it can overwhelm people. And the more you care, the more it overwhelms them, right? So you can see people react badly to the trolling. You know what I mean? Even though they weren't trying to troll anybody, but then it's just the nature of the internet, the nature of social media. It can be tough on people, I think. But I think at the end of the day, when you step back and look at stuff, maybe this will make me get people mad at me, but we're not working in the rocket science business. It's comics. It's in my mind has always been a disposable medium, and as much as I'd like to have the industry cachet of a Jack Kirby, right, who's Devil Dinosaur used, or Frank Miller, who's a hero of mine. I don't know that I'm going to hit that level, but Frank Miller isn't Shakespeare. None of us are going to be Shakespeare, so just kind of have fun with it. I had the good fortune of, when I was working at DC, to work on a lot of great books, none of which were great because I was the assistant editor. It was All-Star Superman. People love that book. I love that book. I love working on it. So many people that book is important to, and I'm so proud of working on it. And my work on that book was literally just whatever that came in, give it to the next person, give it to that. There's never edits. There's never, I'm going to give my little tweak to the story. And remember this part, that was me. There was almost zero of that, literally almost zero. It was sometimes if it was a little too Scottish instead of American, we would chime in and it would be a word gets changed, But as great as All-Star Superman is, as superior as it is, I don't know, I was 30 something when I was working on it. So I was in my 30s. But as much as 30-year-old Brandon loved All-Star Superman, or now in my 40s, how much I still love All-Star Superman, it doesn't even come close to how much 12-year-old Brandon liked West Coast Avengers, and not to talk down on West Coast Avengers, but certainly not something that's going to define characters and experiences and the medium forever. So it's like there's so much power in what 12-year-olds like that you almost can't compare. You can do All-Star Superman, but it's not as much as a little kid, whatever little kids are doing today. Hopefully it'll be a couple of them will read DuckTales or they read Moongirl and Devil Dinosaur. But like I said, for me, it's West Coast Avengers, or it's ROM, or it's Micronauts, or it's, I did like a lot of the mainstream stuff. McFarlane's Spider-Man I loved, and that's kind of a classic. But a lot of the other junk, it was great stuff. You know what I mean? So it's, yeah. I'm not precious about anything that anybody does in this business. And I think we should all kind of sometimes remember that, again, not to disparage the craft, not to disparage the artistic merit that, maybe I've contributed to and certainly other people have. But at the end of the day, it's rock and roll. It's not Beethoven,
Yeah, very, very well said. And you're right. The first love characters is it's hard to get past that. People on my YouTube know that I love Darkhawk. He's my favorite Marvel character, even though he's kind of become like a meme, and he's a little ironic to wear him on your sleeve.
Yeah, there was a Darkhawk comic a few years ago, and people were kind of fighting. It was like just a one shot, and and just Marvel was saying, oh, and like people were fighting over who would get to do the Darkhawk one shot. And I don't remember who even won, and I don't think, obviously it didn't make the comeback that they hoped it would, but because I think a lot of the magic in Darkhawk was locked into, when did it come out? Was it before that? Was it in the 90s? Was it after Image? I guess it was, right? So
it was 90s. I'll perfectly give you the timeline so that you clearly understand why I love Darkhawk, and other people, I assume my age, also like Darkhawk, is that, 1989 Tim Burton Batman comes out.
Yeah.
That summer, my dad took me and my brother right into the comic book store. That kind of caused like a whole comic explosion boom just from that film.
Of course.
And then, just a year later, after that, you have brand new characters coming from Marvel, which is like Darkhawk and Sleepwalker, and these kind of kitschy characters that, for me as a young kid, coming into the store, being pulled in for Batman, and then seeing this new character on the shelf, it's like, he looks so cool. That's kind of where I think like you have that window of time, that generation that just fell in love with this guy.
Yeah, and like that's exactly what I'm saying. It's like, you can read a lot of Eisner winners, but are you going to like them as much as little Mickey, little Swagglehouse liked Dark Horse back then? You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, it's so to me, and maybe sometimes you think you're like, I happen to work with kid stuff. I happen to be able to go with younger readers in that age group. So if someone asked me to 5 years ago or 10 years ago, hey, do you want to write Batman and take it very seriously, or write Avengers and take it very seriously? I'd be a top book. I'm sure I would have taken it, and maybe I'd be having a different point of view now. But, as much as I can think that I'm being honest with myself, it's really cool to be today's version of the guy who put Darkhawk into the hands of a kid who loved it, than it is to be maybe the brilliant creative team behind Saga. But, I read Saga. I like that stuff. I can't go back even to stuff I loved and necessarily like it as much as I did back then. I kind of look at it now and says, oh, well, I remember why I liked it. It's great to flip through it, but I don't know if I'd want to sit around reading West Coast Avengers every single day, you know?
Well, it's like music or flavors of ice cream. It's like, you're kind of in different moods for different, things depending on, where you are in your life and stuff.
Yeah.
So comics is similar in that way. But speaking of, nostalgia, growing up, younger kids, I'm curious if you know about Moongirl and Devil Dinosaur at the height of collecting in 2021, how much your #1 issue was selling for in the CGC 90.
Yeah, a little bit. I guess in 2020, I know everything was higher in 2021. So, when it gets high, I like it, and then if it starts going down, I said, "Oh, I don't want to hear it anymore." I like living in the heights of that type of stuff. I certainly, I'm not a collector anymore. Certainly not of high end stuff. I like to fill in runs for like $1. You know what I mean? And you get anything online now, so to me, it's the thrill of the hunt in the dollar bins for, something that I haven't seen in a long time. But no, I am aware that there was some Moongirl action on all the issues, and well, there should be, because that book made it was even in development. It was, hey, I had done Rocket Girl at Image, which isn't a kid's book. I mean, but sometimes the business works. People kind of get an idea in their head, and Marvel approached me and Amy Reeder, who was the artist on Rocket Girl, said, "Can you do for us at Marvel what you did for Rocket Girl?" And I said, yeah, sure. And then we had our meeting, and it became Devil Dinosaur. And the idea was, though, that it was going to be an all ages book that would be specifically partnered with Scholastic, the publisher who does the in-school book fairs, right? Where you go and the kids can go and they can pick out some books. And not every school does it, but tons of schools do. So somebody at Scholastic was conversant enough with comic book culture and Wednesday Warriors, which I know now is Tuesday and Wednesday, right? But the floppies, the monthlies, the classic core stuff, that they said, well, we want a book from Marvel that's in continuity, because Marvel and everybody else has done children's versions of their characters every so often. And some of that material is fantastic, but somebody at Scholastic told somebody at Marvel, we want a Marvel continuity book that we can sell to elementary school kids in book fairs. And so that was going to be Moongirl and Devil Dinosaur before it came out. And this is a very long way to say that's where the book made money. And it also made money as a collected edition. And then obviously became a cartoon. That's the second season just came out a little while ago. So it's been a valuable property for Marvel. But the idea was never to sell it as monthly issues. Now, I grew up on monthly issues, and I worked at DC Comics, so I understand. And I worked in the Batman office, so I know monthly books. But the print runs aren't very high on the single issues. Creatively, it's like a whole different story, where it's like, if only people reading this are reading it in collected editions, it's a lot easier if I have 120 pages to work with, that I do it as 120 pages, not 6 20-page issues. But it's just, that's how Marvel works. That's how DC works. You just do it, and then they take it and they put it into that other format. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I don't think that there's any Marvel ongoing series that has less copies in circulation than Moongirl and Devil Dinosaur, especially towards the end of the run. So yeah, absolutely, collectors should be snapping them up, and I don't see them in dollar bins and stuff like that. Yeah, so
no. If they're in dollar bins, people are buying them for sure. Yeah. Everyone is pulling them out of those things. To answer the question, I think I had to go back and look. Knowing that we were going to talk. It was around basically $700.
Yeah, just for the regular printing.
Yeah, regular printing, issue number 1. Yeah. So it's like, it's one of those things. Whenever I talk to writers and artists, and they're not as like in tune to the collector world, I always tell them, I say, Brandon, when Dynamite sends you those DuckTales comps, just hang on to them. You never know.
Well, I got a short box full of their Moongirl and Devil Dinosaurs #1.
Oh, don't tell people. Don't tell people that.
But it's not 700. because it's I'll mess up the scarcity. But it's not $700 anymore, right? So
no, it's not. But it might bounce back, like you said, with the show. And I'm curious actually to ask you about that. I don't know if you got to have too much of a hand in making that show, but it's funny how, as you write DuckTales, you're sort of in this position where you're kind of inheriting someone else's creation, and then you're kind of giving it life in your own way.
Right.
And then you did Moongirl, Devil Dinosaur, and then the cartoon is made. And I don't know if you've watched it, or had a hand in it, but what do you think about how the show sort of came out, and what is it like to see a character that you created sort of get put into the hands of another creative team and have them do what they do with it?
Yeah, I mean, whenever it's unavoidable. I don't even mean to start with a negative, but I have positives coming. It's unavoidable that when somebody, even if it is Batman that's been done for 100 issues, when you have a substantial run on it and somebody comes on, they're not gonna keep anything that you did. They're gonna go back to the core that's 50 years old or 20 years old or whatever it is, and then bring new stuff into it. So it's hard to be like, so I looked at a new cartoon and you can get hung up on stuff like, they changed this or they changed that, or the theme is this or the theme is that is different. But again, it's kind of maybe the same mentality where I said, I've got books that I've made and am making that nobody can touch. If I wanted nobody to touch Moongirl and Devil Dinosaur, I would never have done Moongirl and Devil Dinosaur at Marvel. I very much went in hoping and dreaming that one day, I don't know, you said if you remember, it's probably maybe a little bit before your time, but that giant poster, and they've done plenty of all the Marvel Universe posters, but the second run of the Marvel Universe comics, put them all together, it's a big white poster by Hannigan. Why am I blanking on his name? Ed Hannigan? Ed Hannigan, I think.
Yeah, it's like the complete roster.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a big square poster. If you ever go to Midtown Comics here in the city and you're going up the escalator, they got a big original poster of it. When they do that, I want all the characters and Moongirl and Devil Dinosaur. And there's an Alex Ross poster with all the characters with Moongirl and Devil Dinosaur in the back. And that's kind of living the dream, because Marvel isn't about, as much as it was Stan and Jack and then Steve Ditko and everybody else, it's about everybody working on it over all the decades. And it wouldn't have been a successful character if I'm the only one who ever touched Moongirl. And certainly I made changes to Devil Dinosaur. I've worked on other characters. Like Howard the Duck was so associated with Steve Gerber, and Gene Colan did the art. But, it was really Steve Gerber's character. But I did a miniseries that had Howard the Duck in it. And it was different than Steve Gerber's Howard the Duck. And maybe Steve Gerber, and he did say, well, I don't want anyone else to use it until after I'm dead. And it was after he had died that I did it. But he was very unhappy with how he was treated, for probably a lot of different reasons, but creatively when other people would use Howard. But I'm not that way. To me, it's like, hey, it's all fair game, because I made it for other people to use it. It wouldn't have been a success if it couldn't be taken in different directions. Even the comic book that they do come out now, a couple of miniseries and whatnot, it's already changes are being made. And I genuinely embrace it. And people think, oh, you're just saying that. But it's like, it's not choices I would have made, but that what makes it so good. And I copped to it. I didn't have any real involvement on the creative side of things, but I was always in contact with them, and they've always been super nice to me. And I say the same thing. It's like, I like seeing things that I never would have thought of with a character done. And a lot of them I wouldn't do, and I still wouldn't do. But then I see stuff as I go, I wish I thought of that, But that's the Marvel Universe. That's this giant, thousands, tens of thousands. How many pages are there of Marvel Comics now? I don't know. And then you put it in the movies and in the TV shows and everything else. And you think of it as a multiverse, and it's all one big story that's going on. That's a Grant Morrison kind of idea, right? That's just this one continuous growing story. And if you create a character that only you have touched, that means nobody else was inspired to do anything with it, and that's kind of against the my opinion, the point of working for Marvel in the first place.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everybody kind of puts their own sort of special sauce on it. It doesn't belong to just you. It belongs to not just the company, but sort of just everyone who reads comics in general. It's sort of there. So in a way, as you kind of give birth to this character, you at some point have to say, okay, goodbye.
Yeah, 100%. And when they do an anniversary issue, as long as they let me do a couple pages in the back of it, I'll never complain. And what you said, it's 100%. I really do believe that it is everybody who works on it, and it's everybody who enjoys it. It's the readership in a lot of ways, and that's not. I don't say that to pander. I am a fan and I am a reader, and and I have worked on the publishing side of things and obviously on the creative side of things, and readership is really big because what people buy, what people respond to, what people like. Maybe some of those people later in life become creators. Obviously, 99% of them aren't going to be, but their choices and what they buy and what they like and what they demand shapes the universe too. It's very, very much, we're all in it together. So,
yeah, I'm curious as far as creator ownership and credit. If you have thoughts on this, it's kind of been a recent conversation in the wake of the Deadpool Wolverine movie, that Roy Thomas has been added as a creator of Wolverine, and that kind of caused a lot of conversation within the creator spaces and royalty spaces and all this conversation.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you just in general have thoughts on that. I mean, I don't know. none of us were in the building when they were having these conversations. Maybe they all had hands in it. Maybe they didn't.
Yeah.
But did you feel any way when that happened, or have any opinion on that when that occurred?
No, I honestly not specifically on the Roy Thomas thing. And if I did have an opinion, I tend to keep that to myself. So no offense to you trying to get interesting information for the readers, but it's kind of like what you had just said. It's a lot goes on behind the scenes that you'll never know about, and the criminology of, like, I'm on the outside looking in. I was on the inside long enough, knowing that if you're on the outside looking in, you have no idea what's going on. I know a little bit about comics. There are people who were in the room and they don't know what was going on in that same room a couple hours later. Generally speaking, Roy Thomas is as far as Marvel rewarding him, well, Marvel should find any way they can reward Roy Thomas to reward Roy Thomas because of how much he's given to that company. So if it's the idea of, well, we'll give him some bonus when we use Wolverine, for everything that he gets paid for, there's 10 things that he probably doesn't get a structured compensation for. And even on Moongirl and Devil Dinosaur, that's the way I get participation on Moongirl. They call it participation. Where you get it's certainly, if it appears in TV, if a new series comes out, whatever, I get it along with Amy Reeder and Natasha Bustos. The three of us are co-creators. But even in that, there's plenty of people who have had terrible experiences. My experiences have been very good, but it's not always even by the book of the agreement that kind of controls that participation. That's not even an agreement; it's just a participation program. But there have been other ways that Disney and Marvel have found ways to help us, participate in the success of Moongirl, and maybe they're doing that with Roy. I don't know. I know there was some, obviously Len Weins and Herb Trimpe aren't with us anymore, and I think John Romita is also. Is it the four of them have some kind of? Are credited? I think.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, certainly Herb Trimpe.
Yeah, if it's taking away from somebody else, then it's maybe an issue. You know what I mean? And I don't know what the deal that they've given to Roy, or any of those other guys. But it's tough to say. I truly believe that there's no way that I know. So if there's no way that I know, there's no way that the average reader is going to really know. But people like to have opinions, and it's not a bad conversation to have. I worked a little bit with Neil Adams on stuff, and again, all these guys who aren't with us anymore. But Neil Adams, for every day that he lived and was at a convention, should never have to buy a drink. And I don't think that he was even a drinker. But every paycheck that I get, every paycheck that anybody gets from Marvel or DC, there's a couple of bucks in there because Neil Adams busted chops and never gave up on compensation for our, even if it's just a work for hire agreement. Those dollars are a little bit higher because of Neil Adams. And there's certain guys out there that have done a lot that we all benefit from. So yeah.
I think everyone was very passionate about it, but at the end of the day, I think from the fan perspective, the reader perspective, we all have so much admiration for the creators, and we just want them to get the credit. So hopefully the chips fall the way that they should, as it all sort of like. Who knows?
And not only is the specifics of the creation of Wolverine out there, it's personalities of a lot of people who have big personalities over decades. If a digression for a second, and I do know that a lot of your viewers are the hardcore collector. I had it was really great. Herb Trimpe, at his last convention, it was only a few days before he died. He died jogging. He was a very healthy guy, but I was literally sitting right next to him at his last convention over in New Jersey. And he was a nice guy, and I had never gotten to talk with him or speak to him. Obviously, he's done so much work. I like his big, goofy Hulk. I'm friendly with Simon Bisley, who was at that show also and was a huge Herb Trimpe fan. So it was nice to just be able to talk to him just kind of goof off on stuff. I like his GI Joe stuff, everything he ever did. But the entire show, he was busy, and I'd known Herb Trimpe as a fan going to shows, and sometimes he wasn't so busy. But luckily, he stuck around long enough that the collectors This was way before COVID, but the collector business, the energy is really picking up again. So he had very long lines, and every single person. I haven't seen more Hulk 181s. I didn't even know that many existed, because he must have signed hundreds just at that convention. Everybody, constant line. Some people had 2 or 3 copies. So, I know scarcity is a big issue. And obviously the CGC, you have a census and you know what's out there. But, if you got the money, there'll always be a copy of Hulk 181 somewhere out there. It's not, because as a kid, it was like my dream to have that and Silver Surfer #4, right? I knew that I would never have like a Fantastic Four #1 or something, let alone a Detective Comics 27 or something like that. But it was kind of, I liked it that, oh my God, look at these piles of still, whatever year it was, CGC was definitely around. People still bringing raw copies for him to sign nonstop.
It's funny that you bring that up. I mean, people who watch will know. We joke about Hulk 181 being not rare, but at the same time, hey, it's just that popular. There's just so many people that want it that on the supply and demand scale, it still works out to where it still costs thousands of dollars.
Yeah. And thousands of dollars, not even for that nicer one anymore, right? So
yeah. Well, we're going into the 6 figures, and you get to like the 988. So you got to have big pockets for that one.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like you mentioned, before we talked a little bit how back in the day you used to own a comics shop.
Yeah.
Or you were somebody who worked in a comic store. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, so in the summer between 8th and 9th grade, I started working at local I would get tables. I was a collector, so I had a bit of my own collection. And this would have been like late 80s, like maybe 89 or something like that. And, I've been, going to conventions for a couple of years before that. And I always say that I grew up at a really good time, because you couldn't get like Silver Age stuff, right? So it's funny because I never really read a lot of Jack Kirby Marvel stuff, because there were reprints, but I wasn't, obviously there were not reprints like trade paperbacks and stuff like that. There were those 70s Marvel reprints. Excuse me. But a lot of the Warren magazines from the 60s and 70s, Jim Starlin stuff, Neil Adams, like we're talking again, Bernie Wrightson, Mike Kaluta, all that stuff I could kind of access affordable. It was all affordable in dollar boxes or quarter bins or whatever the case may be. But so I had a nice collection of things, and I started selling at conventions every month as just a little kid, right? I was just, like I said, what are you, 12 or 13 years old? And I did that for, years and years and years. And then by the time I was 19, you have the 90s, mid 90s rolling around, and everybody going out of business with the contraction of, all the different distributors. I'm sure I'm not, maybe not every fan knows, but I won't go into the details because I'm sure a lot of the people who watch your channel are aware of it. So it was, so I, like I said, so very familiar with the comic convention scene, local stuff. And I was never the guy who had the Fantastic Four #1, but I'd have the McFarlane stuff that I was able to pick up, or I'd get some cool stuff, and you could kind of buy and sell and get some stuff and keep a little business. And I wasn't, paying for my kids' college tuition or the rent. Right. So it was okay for me to do it. But that was it was a really great experience for me. And by the time I was 19, I grew up, my parents are divorced. My father lived in the city, but I lived up in the suburbs, about 30 minutes north of New York City. And the local comic shop was on hard times, like every shop was at the time. And I bought in for half of it. And I worked there for about 4 or 5 years. And while it was cool owning a shop for me at 19, I didn't think it was as cool in my mid-20s. And I've been married all this time. And my wife had some, she's a totally different animal than I am. She's a chemical engineer, and she had just finished up her PhD. and was going to go do what they call a postdoc, where you do a couple of years of research all the way out in Caltech. So now was a good time for me to get out of the business in my 20s. And I was the store was around for a long time. It's called Alternate Realities in Scarsdale, New York. But a few years ago, it finally closed down. But no, I'm a member of the tribe. So, I've been kind of off in the woods for a long time, but I'm a member of the tribe.
Hey, wait! If you own a comic shop, well, once a collector in a way, always a collector.
Yeah,
I'm curious now.
It was at a time that was interesting because it was when I was a kid, a little kid. Obviously, I guess I was still a kid at 19. But when I was a little kid, comic shops, you got all your new stuff there, but there was also plenty on the newsstands. At least in New York City and the Northeast. Comic shops were places to get back issues and things that you couldn't get. Obviously, the wall books, right, for collectors, but even just stuff if you wanted to read something cool and pay $3 or $4 or $5 or $10 for it, you would do that at a comic shop. Obviously, you had a lot of big collectors going into it with a Valiant and Image and Death of Superman and all that kind of stuff, and you had a big implosion. But when I came into it at that point, I wouldn't have been able to afford to go on unless there was kind of a crisis in the industry. But at that point, I had the good idea. We had the good idea of being more reader focused. So it was like, okay, if you want to come and read the books, come in. Trade paperbacks, what they used to call the star system, because you had a star catalog for the backlist items, where you could buy one of every trade or two of every trade and have them in stock at all times. So it kind of I was in the business at a time that I always think, and you tell me, Mickey, if it's kind of your perspective on the history. You had collectors, and then you had the readers, and I was there for the readers. Like, hey, because you didn't really have Amazon. You did, but it wasn't as big as it is now. You certainly didn't have the digital where you could pick up anything, and so you had the readers who the best place to get the comics you wanted to read was in the comic shop. And then, after I was leaving, it became more of like a destination, the hangout place where they have cool T-shirts and you can talk comics. But, if you really wanted to trade paperback or to read it, you could always get it if you wanted on Amazon or wherever else. And then comic shops now, there's a lot more collectors coming back into it. So it's kind of still a destination, but a lot of shops are, with big back issue assortments and appealing to the collectors again, kind of a circle, but I don't know if that's
yeah, it's interesting. I think, to answer that, I think comic shops have become in a lot of ways like pop culture stores.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of have to carry a little bit of everything. I think the ones that have done better, like in the last couple calendar years, are definitely the ones that do a mixture of like new comics, but also have the back issues, because you got to just have the widest net to sort of get whatever customer you want. If you just rely on the modern reader, you might not be able to always have great months. Comics, I feel like the turnover in terms of like what people go into it and out of it, I feel like it's very high in general. Like you go in periods where you're like really into it, you read a bunch, life happens, you get out of it, then you come back into it. And so there's always that turnover. So you always have to kind of appeal to like the widest margin of people. But I do think that the comic shop is certainly is a hub for people to kind of feel community more than anything. I mean, I think for a lot of retailers, it would probably be easier to just sell online or move their retail store into, an eBay store and just do that. Like if you really want to keep your overhead low and still be profitable, that's probably the smarter thing to do in a way. But at the same time, it's kind of sad because I feel like the comic shop is that lightning rod. It's like the place that brings everyone together in a way. It's where you argue about who's stronger, Hulk versus Thing. You get into these very important conversations. And so hopefully that stuff always sort of sticks around. And I'm curious with your perspective of like having worked in it way back when, now being sort of on the other side as a creator and being a writer all these years, what do you think the kind of biggest pain points in comics are today, as far as like getting people to, pick up DuckTales or buy single issues or read, or what's your sense of that?
Yeah, well, it's there's a lot of pain points, unfortunately. It's some of it, it can get categorized as reality, which is a big challenge, because I did a Kickstarter for Rocket Girl, and Halloween Eve was a one shot that we did before that. But we had about 1,600 backers on Rocket Girl, which was and I always shoot more for the backers than the dollars, and I think just under $40,000. And this was more than 10 years ago now, 11 or 12 years ago. And they say, oh, cool, I can do it, and you kind of sustain yourself. But now, you're, and I know you did a Kickstarter. Your partners. My partner was Amy Reeder on that book, but it was also the United States Post Office. It was also the printer. It was also, you know what I mean? It's very hard to hit. So you want pain points today. It's like, the cost of paper and distribution and everything else that you can think of. It's not really so, and there's just so many factors in it. So, distribution of single issues is obviously a big challenge. If I could point to one thing where there's, I think, opportunity and focus, the business can do better at, and probably should do better at, it really comes down to literally sales. Content, I think, is very good. You do have not as many shops as you used to, but 1,000 shops is not bad. There's only a few thousand libraries in all of America, and it seems to work out okay. People do like to have physical objects. Obviously, a lot of people watching us on your channel love comics and love the individual stuff, but even a trade paperback can be special, right? Because if you can give it as a gift at Christmas time. It doesn't cost too much money. It means you kind of thought of something. Somebody might enjoy it. Like, it doesn't have to be a comic book. Any book, kind of as a physical media, still kind of works. It's not going to be as big as flipping on HBO Max or Netflix or whatever the case may be. But you can still kind of there's still, I think, enough of a demand for print. So it's really, like I said, it's really getting it into people's hands, and I'm not so high on crowdfunding now, just because it takes a lot, and but I am interested in kind of, and I think smart publishers are interested in like what you call D2C, right, direct to consumer, where it's like if you're a creator, maybe you have a big newsletter and you're able to kind of move those. They say if you have 10,000 fans, right, you'll be able to do whatever you want to as a creator forever. But to be able to sell direct to the consumer, to be able to use platforms like YouTube or Facebook to kind of identify things and be able to sell it, because a few thousand copies makes a difference. It's that I would put, like I said, that's kind of like a more interesting thing to me. But unfortunately, there's like no one channel that can do it. Like Moongirl is a great example. Well, we sold the single issues. We sold the trade paperbacks through stores. We had kind of a different model through selling the trades through. There were different editions at first, but then still a totally different market selling it through the book fairs, the Scholastic book fairs, which is a huge market. Then you have the cartoon coming up, and if you're not lucky enough to actually get a cartoon, well, maybe get some option money and different stuff like that. I don't know if I'm dancing around your question too much by throwing.
Well, I think if you had the silver bullet, you would fire that gun.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is everybody. I think like you kind of framed it. There's so many pain points. But it's interesting to kind of hear where you're coming from your perspective. Being in the industry.
Yeah.
For me, it's the one thing that I'll point out, and I won't say that this is the biggest pain point. This is just something that is observational to me, where it's, here I am, a guy who has a YouTube channel, and I'm knee deep in comics and collecting, but I can't tell you who's writing Iron Man right now, and I couldn't tell you when the next issue comes out.
Yeah.
And that seems like, if I'm the most like hardcore, type of person, and I don't know, like, that seems like, okay, well, there's some disconnect here, maybe from a marketing, or like you say, in a way, a distribution, or like the channels that are really penetrating and cutting through the noise. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't like to be critical, because, like I said, I'm a part of the business, so point one finger, someone 4 fingers are pointing back at you, or however the saying goes.
Right.
But geez, I was at when was All-Star Superman? It's I hope it hasn't been 20 years yet, but maybe it has been. It's been a long time since I've been at DC. No. My older daughter just turned 15, and she was born when I was working at DC. So getting close to 20 years. But you can certainly go back to Marvel movies, even pre-MCU, right? Go back to X-Men and Spider-Man, where you had pop culture movies dominated by superhero content, and it did not translate over to sales of current stuff. Being at DC at that time, 15 years ago or so. So you're right in the as movies are dominating, and even though they've dominated for years, still on the ascent. It seemed almost as if the publishers had given up on trying to connect. Hey, millions of people are seeing our movies. Why are our sales, if we're lucky, in the tens of thousands? And you're right, there is a disconnect.
Before I let you go, I always like to ask creatives this aspect. I feel like it's something that's interesting to kind of get into, and everyone's talking about it. But AI is a big conversation, not just in comic books, but certainly in everything in life right now. But as far as comics is concerned, I'm curious what you think about it. There's been like a lot of almost like I don't want to say witch hunt, but I'm going to say witch hunt because how else can I describe it? There's been a lot of people like kind of pointing out like, oh, this art looks like it's AI and blah, 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 and kind of finger pointing. I'm somebody who I view AI a little bit more as a tool. I'm not saying like I'm ready to submit to, our robot overlords here, but at the same time, I feel like, maybe there's a way that this can all coexist and everyone can enjoy, it coming on. But what's your thoughts on it as somebody who's a writer in the industry?
Well, it is very much a hot topic, and people who have thought about it a lot more than me, who I respect, are a lot more worried about it than I ever was. So I don't want to say, oh, well, to me, I don't really care so much because, except people like I said, who are good people in this business, whether they're creators on the creative side or the publishing side, or even on the, the marketing, sales, retail side. But, obviously AI is more of a creative question, but people who have chimed in are a lot more worried about it. And like I said, I almost trust them. So I hesitate to say what I'm about to say, which is, man, if I was that 12-year-old kid again that we were talking about, what would be cooler than telling a computer, hey, what if, Punisher was a dinosaur and, he was on planet Mars fighting mushroom men, and you could get that out in 30 seconds. I mean, it would be so appealing. So as obviously we're not there yet with the technology, and I don't know, again, I don't follow it. So I don't know if the technology is going, it's come so many leaps and bounds already, but is that trajectory going to keep up? Or, some people are saying, oh, you know what, everything that we thought about AI is maybe not what we thought it was. It's really super early. If it works, if it can do everything that people are afraid that it can do, you're out of luck, because it's not going to stop. You can't stop it. So do you use it? Do you have protections put in? I mean, I don't know. It's not going to be the new frontier is not going to be comics. It's going to be, look, Harrison Ford is young again in Indiana Jones 6 because it's completely digitized, right? It's very hard to say. I will say that I worked on, and this is again, I keep saying before COVID because it's such a watershed moment. It's like, it's like before and after the flood, I guess. But it was 6 or 7 years ago. I did a lot of work for one company on a VR game, a VR experience, where you put the goggles on and you sit there. And, I wasn't too familiar with it, but they had me come over and work on some story elements. And it got made. It was a VI thing called The Great C. And I won a bunch of Great C, the letter C. It was based on a Philip K. Dick story. And it got a lot of, publicity. It was really cool. But even before I worked on that, I kind of went over and they showed me the best of VR. I said, okay, well, I'll put the helmet on. And it was so amazing. And I'm not easily impressed. I'm not like, oh, country bumpkin that got hoodwinked. It's like, you look down, it feels like you're looking down. You walk to the edge of the building, you really do feel like you're going to go right over it. It's a 360-degree canvas. It was all amazing. And it was going to, and I sat there saying, people will be, whether it's 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 20 years from now, everyone's going to be sitting in there on their couch with a headset on, and they're going to be playing a game, or they're going to be watching a movie, or they're going to be looking at a concert, whether it's the, Taylor Swift or some 60s Beatle concert. You're going to sit there and have the experience. There's no way, because it's so good now, and it's only going to get better, and it's only going to get cheaper, and it's only going to, and I don't follow that business, but it seems like not so much anymore, right? And this stuff was amazing, and I know there was some Star Wars experience, right, out in was it Vegas or California or something that they had, and people who saw that were like so amazed and blown away, but it just didn't catch on. So who knows if AI is what it's, people think it will be. But I happen to think that if I were a betting man, I'd put on AI is coming. And so you gotta work it somehow. And like I said, technology changes aren't easy, but if it's coming, you can't stick your head in the sand, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
No, it does. I think that you're right. I mean, it's the dam has been broken, and the tidal wave is coming either way. So it's really a matter of like, how do you want to catch this wave? But I do think, like you said, I mean, again, everything is exponential, so maybe it'll be faster than we think, but it probably is a little bit away before you can get perfectly, sequential panels to actually tell, a coherent story. But at the same time, even if it does become that place where, like you said, there's the 12-year-old, kid who just has the imagination to create. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that'll be what it is. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe the technical craft isn't as important anymore as sort of like, the vision that, you might have, or the storytelling that you have behind, the tools itself. So, I think at the end of the day, like what Brandon decides to do with DuckTales, whether you decide to write the dialogue specifically or not, it's still going to be your vision, and your take on it. And I'm excited to see that. But Brandon.
Yeah. Like I said, and people want to just it's out in November. So and like I said, it's Dynamite. So there's going to be 4 billion different covers and all the different kinds of.
So. Dynamite. They love to do their covers. They know that they're appealing to the collectors. But well, let me do this officially. So DuckTales coming out in November. Brandon, I want to say thank you for hopping on the channel and having this conversation today. But maybe you can let the people know officially, when the book will be out and where they can follow up with you if they want to, know more about what you're working on.
Yeah, so November 6th is the in store for the first issue, and then it'll be monthly after that. If you want to, there's only one Brandon Montclair out there. So, if you Google me, you'll find me. I got a website that you can sign up. I'm trying to get more active on everything, because last couple of years, like I've been working behind the scenes and not up on it. But BrandonMontclair.com, there's a newsletter I'm gonna try to start up. So please sign up for that if you're interested. And if you follow me, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter, or I'm just now getting on Instagram, that'll be a place where you'll always get the latest news from me, and maybe some interesting content. I'll start putting some time in on that too.
Well, definitely. I'll put a link to the website in the description, and I will definitely give DuckTales a read when it comes out. I'm looking forward to it. And Brandon, thank you so much for hopping on the channel today.
Mickey, thanks. It was a lot of fun.